The Pacific Northwest is rife with old mining towns, places that have been abandoned to become ghostly tourist attractions. Join me as I tell the tale of 3 such places. Welcome to Spooky Tales of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Hello and welcome to Spooky Tales of the Pacific Northwest and beyond. I'm your host, Jennifer. Today we are going to be talking about a couple ghost towns and one living ghost town, which I found pretty interesting. So this is actually a little similar to the first episode, in which I have never heard of these places, and I've lived here for a really long time, pretty much my entire life. And I've never, thought that to do any research about this stuff. So I'm going to go with the assumption that this particular podcast is going to be very interesting, and I'm going to be learning quite a bit about this area that I never knew before, which is one of my favorite things in the world to do. So, our first ghost town is the Monte Cristo Ghost Town, which is located in Snohomish County, Washington. And it was built and discovered in the late 1880s. A gentleman by the name of Joseph Pearsall, I think that's how you say his name, discovered gold and silver in the South Fork of the Sauk River. This discovery was also shared with a gentleman named Frank Peabody. And in the 1890s, the Monte Cristo Mining Company filed a plat, or that a plot is a document that shows your property lines and property corners and all of that kind of stuff. And this was filed for the town of Monte Cristo. During this time, an engineer named John Q. Barlow also surveyed a route for the railroad, and by the time the plat was filed, there was a railroad that was reaching Monte Cristo. Monte Cristo attracted many different kinds of miners and businessmen. One of those businessmen was actually John D. Rockefeller, so that's pretty interesting. The mining boom in this area lasted from 1895 to about 1912. But by 1920, all of the mining had basically come to a close, and the town was pretty much abandoned. It was the victim of frequent fires and a lot of floods because of its location. Washington, if you didn't know, particularly in this area of Washington and eastern Washington, is actually subject to quite a few wildfires. So it's really not surprising that they had to deal with a lot of different fires. Because of all of these things and because of the location, it started to be a little less accessible outside of the summer months, which is pretty understandable because we have really wet and kind of soupy winters in Washington. So that doesn't not surprise me at all. Surprisingly, what I did find was that President Trump's grandfather actually had a hotel there, and there. So that was pretty interesting when I read that. In 1960, there were a couple of attempts to develop the area into a resort, but it failed. Mostly because of the poor access and the snow that is not real suitable for skiing. I guess there's, different kinds of snow, and some of it is suitable for skiing and some of it is not. So the area that it's at is pretty. And I'll share some pictures of the area on the Instagram, which is Spooky PNW podcast is the Instagram that I have for the pod. The area is surrounded by pretty tall peaks, and there are actually still some buildings left standing. in the town, and there are artifacts all around. But if you go and visit, don't take things because that's kind of just rude. There was a fire in the 1980s that actually destroyed the hotel that was there, which was President Trump's grandpa's hotel, and that led to the formation of the Monte Cristo Preservation Group in 1983. Um, According to YouTuber Speakeasy, Monte Cristo is actually fairly haunted. Apparently, there was some fight over something. I can't remember exactly what it was. It was either like a stake or a claim or something. And one of the miners actually shoved another off the cliff. And the one that got shoved off the cliff obviously died. And I mean, it was pretty quick in arresting him and everything like that. But the rumors do say that the man was found dead in his cell after the next morning with apparent hand marks around his neck. So that's pretty interesting. But the site has, like at all mining places, especially in those times, did have to deal with accidents and all that kind of stuff. So it does stand to reason that there was quite a few deaths at that mining camp or town, I should say. But people have seen lights and heard voices in the area during, at nighttime and during the day. Um, they've found some silhouettes in photos. People have also seen full-bodied apparitions in attire, in old-fashioned attire. I couldn't confirm this, but on the YouTube video from Speakeasy that I watched, they said that people have gone missing near the area and the bodies have been found in really bad shape, which, I mean, if you go missing in any kind of, forested area, you're probably not going to be found in very good shape. I mean, there's a lot of the elements, animals and all that kind of stuff. So it does stand to reason that they were found in pretty terrible shape. And then I guess people have seen the ghostly hikers that seem to just fade into the landscape of the area. So I couldn't confirm the missing hikers and the people going missing in this area and to be turned up. Obviously, people go missing in a lot of different areas. You get, you go off trail and stuff like that and get a little bit lost. So it does, it's pretty normal, I guess, to find people missing, but I couldn't confirm exactly any of the things that Speakeasy said happened in her YouTube. There's also been some, like high EMF and EVP activity. EVP, I think, is the voice phenomenon, and then EMF is the electrical stuff. People have heard sounds of old equipment working still in the night, from the mines. People have also heard screaming from the mines. So yeah, it's pretty fascinating. It's pretty easy trail, I think. If I remember correctly from what I was reading, that it's pretty easy going. Like there's no like huge inclines or anything like that. And maybe one of these days I'll go there and check it out and take pictures. But yeah, so like I said, I'll share some pictures and a little bit of information on the Instagram, and that's at Spooky PNW Podcast. So our next place is actually located in Idaho, and it is the Bayhorse Ghost Town, and it's also another mining town, and it's located in Challis, Idaho. This mine was used to mine lead, silver, and charcoal, and it was established in 1877, but it only lasted about 20 years before it was abandoned and to become a ghost town. So now it's part of the Yankee Fork State Park located in Idaho. About 300 people or so lived in Bayhorse while it was still a booming town. And it, they did have a lot of potential. It did say that it had a lot of potential and all of that kind of stuff. People were building houses and settling and prospering for several years before a pretty fairly large fire destroyed a majority of the town in the late 1880s. The people tried to rebuild, but it was really difficult for them. And then a water shortage in that same year shut the place down. And in 1989, there was also an attempt to rebuild it, but it was deemed permanently closed and dismantled. Some of the buildings do remain, and there is a trail that you can explore. That I think the length of the trail is fairly short. I also have some pictures of this ghost town that I will share on the Instagram. They do say there are some rumors that say that Bayhorse is said to be haunted by residents long past. And like I said, with Monte Cristo, there's a lot of mining towns have accidents. People die. So if you believe in that kind of stuff and you believe in the paranormal and all that, it would stand to reason that there's ghosts sitting there. I am not one of those kind of people who think that ghosts are malicious or anything like that. A lot of the times I think they're just imprinted and energy imprinted in the ether. And so they're just replaying their last, days or whatever. So I think that if you go there and you visit it and you hear things, I don't think that you should have anything to fear from them. I think that you probably really enjoy yourself. And this Bayhorse looks pretty really lovely too. There's a few different things that I think that would be really interesting to explore. A few dilapidated buildings and stuff. Our next town is actually the living ghost town, and this one is still technically, it's not technically a ghost town in the sense of what a ghost town is, what our definition, I guess, is a ghost town, because is a small population that still lives there, but the population is so small that you wouldn't really consider it to be a thriving town, and the population just shrinks every year. And this town is called Antelope, and it's located in Wasco County in Oregon. And it was established in 1872, and it was the home to, it was established to be a ranching area for horse and cattle, but it primarily turned into just basically, sheep herding and cattle ranches and stuff. It was named Antelope by the European settlers who saw a bunch of antelope in the valley when they arrived. So clever enough, they named it Antelope. It did serve as a connection between gold mines in Canyon City with the Columbia River, until, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a new railroad line that kind of cut that in half, so they didn't really use Antelope anymore for any of that kind of stuff. It was officially incorporated in 1896, and it had an initial population of about 250. But shortly after the turn of the century, it started to decline. Right before the turn of the century, a fire, mining towns and fires, right, destroyed most of the businesses in town. The damage is said to have been $70,000 in that time, which, if you adjust for inflation and all of that kind of stuff, it would be $2.5 million by today's standards in damages. That's quite a bit. And I think back then it would have been quite difficult to recoup those losses. They never really could truly rebuild what they lost. But that unfortunately would not be the end of Antelope's trouble. A few years later, there was a lot of stuff going on. Some of it pretty awful, I would assume, and or I think anyway. And it centered around the sheep and the sheep herding. People were, I guess, warring against the ranchers, which I find it's kind of silly to war against sheep ranchers. I mean, why? What's the point? What's the reason? I don't understand it. But it was pretty horrific. I think just by the fact that like for no reason they were killing sheep. Just because they were pissed off at the sheep herders and everything like that. So they were killing their sheep, burning their sheds, destroying their like hay crops and everything like that. It's terrible stuff. Um, it it just I just don't understand why you would do something like that. But all of this trouble with the this rancher war actually led to more loss of revenue, and it even lost more of the population, and it dropped down to just a few dozen people at most. The biggest trouble I feel like they had was in the 1980s. The town was swamped with devotees of Rajneesh, oh my god, the Rajneesh movement. They were followers of an Indian mystic named Sri Rajneesh, and the movement was based on the teachings of Bhagwan, which is optimism, free love, science, and mysticism. It's kind of in direct, opposition to Christianity and all that kind of stuff. Because of the devotees' huge cash flow from different kinds of events and book sales and things like that, they kind of were able to purchase huge swaths of land, like this huge swath of land, like a 64,000 acres, excuse me, on a ranch called Big Muddy Ranch. I like the name. The leaders of the movement wanted to use the ranch to build a community, and some like 7,000 devotees moved to the ranch. They did change the name from the Big Muddy Ranch to Rajneesh Param Commune. I'm not quite sure what the Param part of that means, but this event and this activity from this particular movement did upset quite a few of the original residents, and most of them started selling their property and they left. So, they had 7,000 devotees plus a handful of the original residents left. So the devotees took over the town and they changed its names to Rajneesh, and the movement was successful there for a few years before it all started to, crumble like a cookie. Turns out the group was involved with bioterrorism and the leaders were arrested for attempted murder. They actually poisoned people with salmonella. And what had happened was they were trying to control an upcoming election in the Dalles. And so they infected a lot of food in several different restaurants there with salmonella. And this act actually, poisoned quite a few people, and it was pretty awful. I was a kid. I wasn't even barely born, so I don't remember any of this kind of stuff. So I'm going to have to do a little bit of research and figure it out. But this event actually was considered one of the first bioterrorist attacks on U.S. soil, and hundreds of people were poisoned, and the Rajneesh movement, their leaders were arrested and deported, and the commune was destroyed. Unfortunately, the population of Antelope never really recovered from this, and as of 2021, only 38 people make their home there. That's why I call it a living ghost town. Like 38 people is not very much, and it kind of made me think of the movie Tremors and the Paradise, California that the movie is, that fictional town that it's based on. They had very few people that were living in it, but they were all pretty tenacious and pretty stubborn and weren't ready to leave. And if you haven't watched Tremors, watch Tremors, because if you haven't, you're a heathen. Um, anyway, that's why I call it a living ghost town. It's not going to take much for, the rest of the people to actually leave and move out of the town and for it to actually become a real actual ghost town. I like the other two, I will share some images of the place on the Instagram. And I will also be linking some sites that you can look up for each of these things, if I can figure out how to make the links work in the description. And again, the Instagram for the podcast is Spooky PNW Podcast. That's the Instagram. I also have an email, and I am going to be asking people for their own Pacific Northwest spooky tales that I can read once a month on the podcast. And you can, you can email those to spookypnwpod@gmail.com. And just send them in as an attachment or whatever, and I will read them once a month on the podcast. And I hope it'll be fun. So thanks for joining me. I'm not quite sure what my next episode will be, but I'm sure it will be just as not interesting as this one. Thanks for being here. Thanks.